Our story begins with Shao Kong, who handed over a can of 8 treasure porridge to a beggar and was led to be reborn. He was bound to a system that allowed him to swap his grades with mine. Thanks to that porridge, his grades skyrocketed. Before graduation, he was recruited by a famous university with special offers, gaining the status of a genius, while I, who was once the star student, became the worst student in the entire school. In the end, I was pushed into the river by someone he arranged and drowned. Now I have been reborn, and since he wants to swap grades, I'll let him swap until he's had his fill. During morning exercises, Shao Kong placed a can of 8 treasure porridge in front of me, looking at me with concern and urging me to drink it quickly. Before I could speak, the shrill taunts of my classmates echoed one after another. Without exception, everyone praised Shao Kong for being an excellent and kind-hearted student. Yes, of course they did. When they mentioned me, they said I wasn't lucky enough to deserve a friend as outstanding as him. Some classmates even openly slandered me for the sudden drop in my grades. They even blamed me unfairly, believing that I alone had managed to lower the class average. Others complained that I simply wasn't putting any effort into my studies anymore. At that moment, Shao Kong didn't come to my defense. Instead, a flash of complacency shone in his eyes. He pushed the porridge into my hands and exaggerated his efforts. He claimed it cost him a lot to buy this porridge for me and told me not to just stand there, but to drink it while it was hot. In the past, I would have been deeply grateful, thinking he was the friend who cared for me most. But after dying once, I know this so-called friend has been using the system to steal my grades. To be honest, it was a perfect deception. He went from being an ordinary boy to the popular genius of the school. Meanwhile, I couldn't even remember the simplest formulas. When it came to solving problems, I made frequent mistakes, and my ranking plummeted by the end of the year. In that situation, I fell into a deep sense of inferiority, unaware that he had also successfully manipulated our classmates. Behind my back, everyone hated and isolated me. Now, I lift my head with a mocking smile and look at him. I ask him if he hears what everyone is saying. They advise me to study hard, and I can't afford to lose face. Drinking this porridge would waste my study time, so I won't drink it. However, we can't let your kindness go to waste. I told my classmates that if they wanted to drink it, they should come and take it. As soon as I said this, many girls who adored Shao Kong immediately brightened with enthusiasm. They came running over, and seeing this, Shao Kong's face darkened instantly. He shouted loudly that it wasn't for them, but specifically for a student with low grades like me. A heavy-set boy pushed through the crowd, drooling and muttering that it shouldn't be wasted. He wanted to seize the 8 treasure porridge for his breakfast, but Shao Kong felt a lump in his throat. He knew this boy's grades were the worst in the entire year. His face turned red with anxiety, and every cell in his body seemed to resist the desperation of the situation. Imagine the scene, his panic rising as a bold idea forms in my mind. Perhaps this porridge would also work if someone else drank it and the exchange system activated. Suddenly, Shao Kong feigned grievance with reddened eyes and an even sharper voice, asking why I had to trample on his feelings even if I chose not to drink the porridge. He claimed he bought the 8 treasure porridge out of pure sincerity just to help me recover, and expressed his deep disappointment that I would give his gift away. To be honest, he was laying it on quite thick. He compared me to the snake in the fable of the farmer, and suddenly, the classmates who were fighting for the porridge calmed down and looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Finally, they unanimously pointed their fingers at me in anger, threatening that if I didn't apologize to Fuan Wu immediately, they would teach me a lesson. They all raised their fists, ready for a fight. Just as they were eager to start, a line of student council members in uniform suddenly entered the hallway. The girl leading them had long hair and a presence that commanded the room. Her name was Zhentao Yan, the renowned top student who had shared the lead with me back when we first enrolled. At that time, she was the one everyone looked up to. When she first saw me, she looked at me with genuine admiration because my grades were so unusual. Later, it was her friend who reminded her to keep her distance after my sudden decline. She had once waited a long time to exchange study methods with me, but Fuan Wu had deliberately stopped me. Now, Zhentao Yan walked toward our class with the rest of the members as everyone watched. Her voice was light, like crushed ice. She didn't say much, but the boys in the room couldn't help but stare, clearly moved by her presence, which, naturally, was the reaction she usually received. She announced that in about 2 weeks, a school-wide academic competition would be held. The winner would have the chance to secure a recommended spot at a prestigious university. She invited interested students to sign up. Fuan Wu stood up immediately, flashing his most handsome smile as he asked for a registration form. He approached Zhentao Yan generously, deliberately leaning forward to initiate physical contact. She simply smiled and instinctively took 2 steps back to maintain her space. Fuan Wu, however, looked at her with deep, innocent eyes, claiming he didn't understand the rules of the contest. He boldly asked if she would teach him personally. Zhentao Yan blushed for a moment under his gaze before nodding. After she and her group left, our classmates finally began to react to what had just happened. They began to whisper among themselves about the interaction they had just witnessed. It seemed Fuan Wu was intent on pursuing her, using his newfound status to bridge the gap between them. His arrogance was intentional, a calculated move to secure his place at the top of the social hierarchy. For a moment, we see him watching her depart, his mind already working on his next move. He was looking for any possible connection. At that moment, Fuan Wu picked up an exercise book and began flipping through the pages. Then he lowered his head, carefully reviewing the results of his recent mock exam. It appeared his math score wasn't quite high enough yet, and he had also made a few mistakes in his English reading comprehension. To be honest, he still had work to do. He told himself he had to secure that university spot so that Zhentao Yin would finally take the initiative to be with him. He had no idea, of course, that the game was about to change. Fuan Wu muttered something quietly to himself. Then, he suddenly raised his head and fixed his gaze on Ruan Min. At that exact moment, the school bell rang, signaling the start of the next class. Zhentao Yin noticed me again. She insisted that I drink the can of 8 treasure porridge before quickly running back to her seat. He responded with a simple smile. Afterward, he turned to look at a figure rummaging through a trash can just outside the window. It was a homeless person who, despite everything, seemed to possess a certain wise look in her eyes. Her mouth was slightly twisted, and she often found herself unable to stop drooling. Her face was weathered, covered in dark spots from years spent out in the elements. This woman had suffered a terrible car accident in the past, which had left her with significant brain damage. Everyone felt a deep pity for her. Because of this, she was allowed to come to the school to collect whatever recyclables she could find. He realized she lived with an intellectual disability now, and he imagined that, deep down, she surely wished to be whole again. And so, after school, he sought her out and handed her the 8 treasure porridge along with a piece of bread. She accepted the food eagerly and began to swallow it down voraciously, as if she hadn't eaten in days. He was just about to turn and walk away, but the woman reached out and stopped him. When he turned back, she pressed a handful of crumpled, dirty coins into his palm. She told him to take the money, thanking him over and over again with genuine gratitude. She seemed almost embarrassed, explaining that it was all the money she had in the world. The woman continued to search frantically through her pockets, hoping to find something more to give. She smiled at him, showing her teeth, and something about that simple gesture touched his heart unexpectedly. It had been a very long time since anyone had shown him such sincere, kind-hearted appreciation. Without saying a word, he pulled out 200 yuan and gently forced the bills into her hands. After that, he quickly ran away. Without even realizing it, he found himself at the small kiosk tucked behind the school. Suddenly, he felt his mind become remarkably clear, sharper than it had ever been before. The complex formulas that he once struggled to recall were now vivid and perfectly clear in his mind. He pulled out his old notebook of mistakes and began to leaf through the pages. Unexpectedly, he discovered that the solutions to problems he previously couldn't grasp were now right there. He understood them instantly. Suppressing the joy in his heart, he returned to the classroom as if nothing had happened. That afternoon, he arrived at the classroom early and immediately began to study with a new intensity. What he regretted most in his previous life was missing the academic competition and the chance for direct university admission. Suddenly, a loud shout echoed through the hallway, breaking the silence of the school. Fuan Wu, you've got something going on, don't you? I just saw you arrive with Zhentao Yin. It seems they had even been discussing academic problems together, which was quite a surprise. Since they barely know each other, he had never seen her interact with boys for study purposes before today. We have to wonder, are they really going to prepare for the competition together? Things were getting serious. The classmates already believed Fuan Wu and Zhentao Yin were the perfect match. A talented young man and a beautiful genius, certainly a pair that is very easy on the eyes. He couldn't help but feel moved, realizing that Zhentao Yin truly values people based on their academic merit. Whether it was the Fuan Wu from before the grade changes or the current one, she admired his intellect. At that moment, Zua was filled with pride, making absolutely no effort to hide his soaring ambition. What does being popular matter? This time, he was determined to take first place in the academic competition. He was going to secure that direct admission spot, no matter what it took. And he was certain that, eventually, he would win over Zhentao Yin completely. Actually, he decided it should be her who confesses her love to him first. A moment later, Zhentao Yin purposefully ran toward him. Her tone was even more exaggerated as she insisted that, when one is young, winning prizes in every competition is a must. Otherwise, she claimed, it was all just a complete waste of time. What is the use of just studying? She asked, if you don't understand that in this society, grades are king. He listened to these words without flinching, focusing even more intensely on solving his problems. From that day on, Zua focused entirely on how to get closer to Zhentao Yin. And, of course, on preparing himself for the upcoming academic competition. He tried even more actively to use the system to facilitate his exchanges. He took what little study talent and academic advantage he had left, using the excuse that studying requires brain nourishment. Every morning, he would give himself 2 cans of 8 treasure soup. His intellect returned, and his accuracy rate when solving problems left him with no doubts. Under the pretext of constant study, his ability to handle complex problems also increased significantly. When his classmates asked him about it in surprise, he simply lowered his head and said he had been dedicated to his books lately. He began staying late in the classroom, quietly working through one problem after another. This morning, after school let out, he headed to a bookstore just outside the campus. He was about to buy the latest competition exercise book when someone suddenly shoved him from behind, nearly making him fall. In that moment, we see Fuan Wu standing beside Zhentao Yin, who was looking at him with affection, but when he turned toward our protagonist, his face showed nothing but a look of clear and utter disgust. Xuan Wu examined him closely, wondering why, lately, he always seemed so utterly absorbed in his studies. Immediately, he tried to snatch away our protagonist's exercise book to see exactly what he was working on. But he was too slow, as the young man quickly pulled away and took 2 steps back. He failed to grab it, and for a brief moment, his expression tightened with visible frustration. But then, ignoring the crowd around them, he deliberately shouted, asking if Wanman had suddenly started studying diligently lately. He kept repeating the question, mockingly asking if his grades had perhaps improved just a little bit. He then demanded to know how he was studying, insisting that he share his experience with everyone. Lately, it seemed that while discussing problems with Zhentao Yin, he had concentrated so hard his brain had simply overloaded. He was even starting to make mistakes while solving problems, which was quite unusual for him. He felt very worried, and to be honest, Xuan Wu was actually right for once. His accuracy rate in solving those problems had indeed begun to drop significantly. He was even starting to confuse the most basic points of knowledge, a dangerous sign, surely. It's possible Zhentao Yin was just busy, as she didn't seem to notice the admiration he was hiding for the top student. He decided to play along, confirming the fact that he was indeed making mistakes in his work. He even advised him to strengthen his foundation and perhaps use a bit more ingenuity. After that, he prepared to head elsewhere to find the competition exercise book he had been looking for. And this is where things get interesting, as Zhentao Yin, who had been silent this whole time, suddenly spoke up. She scolded Wanman, saying he usually messed with Xuan Wu in private, but now dared to embarrass her in public. She told him he clearly didn't know the meaning of the word manners and demanded he apologize to Zhentao Yin immediately. As the student council president, Zhentao Yin had always been known for her good temper, which made this outburst quite a surprise. He stood there utterly stunned, struggling to find the words to ask if he had really been the one picking on her. He wondered when he had ever messed with her, and, more importantly, why on earth he should be the one apologizing. Xuan Wu quickly chimed in, insisting that everything was just a big misunderstanding, a very convenient one, of course. She claimed that she and Wanman were actually good friends and that she couldn't possibly be jealous of him. She questioned why she would ever bother him, suggesting that any past friction must have simply been a series of mistakes. After saying that, she leaned affectionately against Zhentao Yin, playing the part of the victim perfectly, and Zhentao Yin, naturally, wrapped an arm around her in a protective embrace. She told Wanman that enough was enough, accusing him of being bitter because Xuan Wu had better grades and a guaranteed university spot. She went as far as to claim he was using Nanshan's chemistry against her out of pure spite. She pointed out that Xuan Wu was kind enough to share study methods, while he rejected her and conspired with others to isolate her. She wondered aloud how his heart could be so wicked before deciding they should simply leave. Xuan Wu added that she couldn't possibly stoop to the level of such an academic loser. Zhentao Yin told her she was far too kind, noting that Wanman didn't just have bad grades. To make matters worse, she added that he had a terrible reputation to match. Zhentao Yin looked at him then, and a flash of deep disgust appeared in her eyes, which, to be honest, stung quite a bit. As they prepared to walk away hand in hand, he finally snapped out of his shock and ruthlessly blocked their path. He told Zhentao Yin it was quite funny that she was mocking his grades, of all things. He told her he hoped she would always remember exactly what she had said to him today. He explained that he never envied anyone because he had more than enough confidence in his own abilities. He declared himself the best, and as scattered laughter broke out around them, he felt a surge of pure emotion. He let the competition exercise booklet in his hand fall open, revealing pages dense with complex solutions and mock exams boasting perfect scores. For a brief moment, Zhentao Yin appeared utterly stunned by what she saw. Her lips moved as if to speak, but she said nothing, eventually turning to walk away with Xuan Wu. By the afternoon, the classroom was filled with the usual drowsy energy of students waking from their naps. Xuan Wu walked in carrying large packages, intent on handing out desserts while pointedly mentioning that a single box cost a small fortune. We see that Wanman noticed Xuan Wu was even sporting a vintage-style watch on her wrist. Xuan Wu made sure to show it off, actively boasting about the 30,000 yuan price tag of the timepiece. She even flashed a sweet, practiced smile to everyone in the room. She remarked that a 30,000 yuan watch was actually nothing special to her anymore. She bragged that she and Zhentao Yin were now regulars at 5-star restaurants. In fact, she claimed the money they had spent on meals lately was worth far more than the watch itself. And then, as a final flourish, she mentioned that Zhentao Yin had promised to buy her a car very soon. Hearing her speak of Zhentao Yin so intimately, their classmates exchanged knowing looks and began teasing them about their relationship. They joked that a wedding must be on the horizon and that the two would surely be the star couple of a prestigious university. When a curious student asked when she would join Zhentao Yin in the upcoming competition, she simply offered a disdainful look and a silent, smug smile. Xuan Wu made a show of distributing desserts to everyone in the room, but she pointedly skipped over Wanman. He knew perfectly well that she was trying to embarrass him on purpose, a classic move, really. But he didn't care in the slightest, as the results for last week's mock competition exam were about to be released. His mind was elsewhere, wondering what rank his hard work would earn him now that he was at the center of Zhentao Yan's university world. As for those expensive desserts, he knew that in the near future, he would be more than capable of buying them for himself. When the time for evening self-study finally arrived, the class representative, Huzan, came running into the room. He announced that the results were out and that the student council would be posting them outside any moment now. He looked distraught, muttering that this mock exam had been filled with incredibly difficult competition-level questions. Huzan lamented that he had sacrificed so much, yet he wasn't even sure he would qualify for the competition at all. He felt utterly ashamed, believing he no longer had the right to call himself the class representative. The poor boy fell silent, repeating those words to himself. After all, Huzan had always been the one to take first place. Now, we see him unable to do anything but clutch his head and collapse into his seat, weeping quite bitterly. Naturally, this sight startled everyone, and his closest friends rushed over to offer what comfort they could. The general consensus was that if even the top student had failed, then surely no one in the class would reach the finals. They could only imagine how furious their tutor was going to be with these results. However, through his heavy sobs, the class representative managed to lift his head to tell them something unexpected. He revealed that, against all odds, there was actually a dark horse among them this time. A few minutes later, once the list was posted on the wall, he stood there staring at it for a very long time. As soon as the council members left, the students couldn't resist and rushed out to check the rankings, only to be met with a shock. Wanman's name sat at the very top of the list, and in the overall grade rankings, he had also secured first place. Second place belonged to Zhentao Yan, who, until this very moment, had always been the undisputed number one. From that day forward, Zhentao Yan began to look at Wanman in a completely different light. He started paying special attention to Wanman's every move, even though the two of them were hardly friends. For many days in a row, Wanman noticed that Zhentao Yan was constantly checking his social media profile. Whenever they crossed paths in the hallway, Wanman could clearly feel Zhentao Yan's intense gaze fixed upon him. On one occasion, their vehicles even collided. Wanman had to pedal his bicycle furiously to escape, as if the other boy were about to chase him down. Perhaps it was simply because everyone was now focusing all of their nervous energy on their studies. The rumors regarding the romance between Zhentao Yan and Xuanwu had finally begun to settle, leaving Wanman with nothing but silence. After taking a moment to give some porridge to a local vagrant, he returned to his dormitory to get some much-needed sleep. He waited for the alarm to ring and eventually opened his eyes, feeling a bit dazed but refreshed. To test himself, he picked up a random practice exam and began to work through the problems. A second later, he discovered with great excitement that his peak academic state had completely returned to him. With a sharp mind and photographic memory, his speed and accuracy were even better than they had been before. His heart was racing as he reached for his phone and finally completed the registration form for the competition finals. As it turned out, today was the very last day of the academic course's registration period. Deep down, he was determined to see Xuanwu defeated at the exact moment the other boy expected victory most. When he arrived at school that afternoon, he immediately noticed that his classmates were looking at him with very strange expressions. The moment he sat down, two unpleasant voices rose up behind him, whispering about how wicked his heart truly was. He couldn't understand what was happening until, quite suddenly, someone tossed a phone right in front of his face. We learned that at noon, someone had posted a video on the campus forum that had already spread like wildfire through the school. It showed the scene where Zhentao Yan protected Xuanwu while arguing with him, paired with an unflattering photo of Wanman looking quite fierce. The caption was a supposed expose, mocking the former top student for always being secretly jealous of his own friend. It accused him of making malicious insults and repeatedly creating misunderstandings just to keep his friend in a state of constant distress. The post claimed he was intentionally interfering with his friend's relationship with the school's goddess, causing her to become angry on his behalf. In an instant, a perfect storm of controversy had been unleashed against him. Beneath the post, hundreds of comments had piled up, and every single one of them was an insult directed at Wanman. One user asked who this Wanman even was, claiming they didn't know him, but they certainly knew Zhentao Yan. After all, her reputation for having a kind and gentle temperament was well known throughout the school. Others commented on how terrifying it would be to have a friend like him, even if they were heartbroken that Zhentao liked someone else. But what they wanted even less was to see someone succeed who simply couldn't stand the success of others. Some classmates even recognized him, exclaiming in disbelief that it was the very same Wanman from their own class. It seemed, in their eyes, that he was completely unaware of the kind of person he truly was. Disgusted by the lies but remaining perfectly calm, he simply took out his phone and called the police to report the defamation. He would let the law clear his name, while Xuanwu, the true instigator, was obviously starting to feel quite nervous. Throughout the afternoon, for reasons no one could quite pin down, Xuanwu remained completely distracted. He was even making careless mistakes while trying to solve the simplest of academic problems. And, as we might expect, the teachers of every subject were scolding him without end for his lack of focus. The storm only began to settle when the head of the course arrived to stop Ruanmin from involving the police. After class, the teacher saw the post and deleted it quietly, but by then, nearly the entire school had heard the rumors. For those who didn't know him, his name would now be forever linked to the image of a cold and malicious person. Once the lessons were over, Zhentao Yan made an appearance at their classroom. She was as dazzling as ever, though her expression seemed deeply pained as she looked around. She went directly to find Xuanwu, calling out his name with a sense of urgency. She told him that she hadn't been able to get in touch with him all day, no matter how hard she tried. She had called him repeatedly, but she simply hadn't been able to reach him. She told him she had just discovered he'd blocked her, though she had no idea when it had happened. She insisted she knew everything that had occurred and didn't want him to hide or face the situation alone. She urged him to speak up, promising to stay by his side and support him through it all. Zhentao Yan's comforting words moved everyone in the room, but Xuanwu simply lowered his head in a state of pure panic. Deep down, he was lamenting the fact that Zhentao had been ignoring him so much lately. Suddenly, he clutched his head, claiming it was throbbing with pain, and bolted out of the classroom. The classmates, however, assumed he was just too hurt to expose Ruanmin's supposed filth, and they stood up one by one. They rallied to support Xuanwu, demanding justice and ordering Ruanmin to offer a formal apology. And so, Xuanwu took advantage of the growing confusion to make his quiet escape. A little later, the finals of the academic competition began exactly as scheduled. We see the venue set up in the school's multifunctional assembly hall, ready for the challenge. When Ruanmin walked in, he was met with nothing but looks of utter contempt from the crowd. They began to mutter under their breaths, saying he should just withdraw as soon as possible. After all, this was the grand final, not some casual selection of amateur scholars. They wondered why Ruanmin was even there and told him to leave quickly, which was quite harsh, to be honest. The students claimed they were only there for the big prize that Zanbei had sent over. Since he had barely scraped through the qualifiers, they felt he was only there to cause trouble. Not wanting to waste time, many began declaring their votes for Xuanwu to take first place. In their minds, he was the only true scholar, though they soon began to wonder where Xuanwu actually was. He was nowhere to be seen, leading them to guess he might still be back in the dorm studying. Someone in the crowd asked if there was anyone from his dorm who could go and take a look. Suddenly, a voice cried out, "Look, isn't that Xuanwu being helped along by those two boys?" One student recalled seeing those clothes before. Back then, Xuanwu had even bragged that Zhentao Yan bought them for him. Supposedly, they cost about 50,000 units, and as Ruanmin listened to these comments from the stage, he looked into the distance and saw a familiar bowed head. It was indeed Xuanwu, looking utterly defeated as he was dragged along by his two well-intentioned roommates. Half an hour ago, they had found him sleeping soundly in the dorm and assumed he was simply exhausted from studying and had lost track of time. Regardless of his desperate resistance, they hauled him all the way to the assembly hall to ensure he didn't miss the competition. Xuanwu struggled the entire way, but he was no match for their combined strength and was forced into his exam seat. His roommates finally left him there, satisfied with their good deed, while Xuanwu remained trapped in the hall. He sat there, frozen, as the reality of the situation began to sink in. The pressure of the room seemed to close in on him from every side. He looked like a man who wanted nothing more than to vanish into thin air. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs simply wouldn't obey. He was caught in a nightmare of his own making, with no easy way out. Xuanwu watched the others preparing and desperately wanted to follow his roommates out the door. But the exam supervisor stopped him, and in that moment, his panicked face had nowhere to hide as his once clear mind descended into total chaos. Even the most basic facts escaped him. He gripped his pen until his knuckles turned white, looking nothing like the confident scholar everyone once admired. His legs finally gave out, and he slumped to the floor, clutching his head and screaming at the top of his lungs while the crowd watched in shock. Phone cameras clicked incessantly as every eye turned toward him with contempt or curiosity, but, to be honest, very little compassion. Meanwhile, Ruanmin simply picked up the exam paper on his table and began to write, his pen gliding across the page with effortless clarity. Every step he took to solve the questions was neat and standardized, so exquisite, in fact, that the surrounding noise seemed to fade as he looked coldly at Xuanwu, who remained huddled on the floor. As Xuanwu continued to fall apart, Zhentao Yan stood at the back of the room, his eyes fixed on Ruanmin's fluid problem-solving with a look of pure disbelief. He approached Xuanwu stiffly, wanting to ask a question several times, but in the end, he couldn't find the words. Just then, Xuanwu suddenly bolted upright, his hair a mess and his eyes bloodshot, as his already confused thoughts spiraled into something much worse. Driven by intense emotional instability, his venomous gaze locked onto Ruanmin like a cornered beast at the edge of an abyss, screaming that Ruanmin had only won through dirty tricks. He hysterically shouted that Ruanmin's grades were stolen, his voice instantly drowning out the crowd. Then, before anyone could speak, he began acting like a madman. He pulled out his phone and connected it to the big screen to project several photos one by one, shouting to the crowd that this was the proof they needed. He claimed that Ruanmin was once an academic failure who couldn't solve simple multiple-choice questions, and that this sudden improvement was definitely the result of cheating. He accused Ruanmin of secretly making cheat sheets and, even worse, of hiding his own study materials to prevent him from remembering key points. Every eye in the room turned to the screen, where the first photo showed a boy in Ruanmin's usual clothes sneaking into the school's printing house with his head down. The boy in the second photo wore the same clothes, but this time, we see him entering Xuanwu's residence. When he emerged, he was carrying a stack of documents. Xuanwu claimed this was proof that Ruanmin had stolen his essential competition prep materials. The students were stunned and began to murmur, and just like that, the tide of doubt began to turn against Ruanmin once again. At that moment, Zhentao Yin frowned deeply, his gaze filled with hesitation, but Ruanmin simply smiled and approached Xuanwu without any hint of a hurry. Standing by his side, he calmly asked the judges and his classmates to look closely at the timestamp on the photo, which was set for last Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon. He explained that at that exact time, he was in his tutor's office requesting a permission slip because he had been dealing with a fever the day before. He noted that his tutor was in the office building right now and could confirm his story at any moment, suggesting that the photos had been doctored with Photoshop. Xuanwu accused him of lying, claiming Ruanmin couldn't prove his innocence and was only blaming AI, which, ironically, was an admission that the photos were generated. Ruanmin told him to stop the defamation and suggested that since the matter wasn't resolved, they should simply leave it in the hands of the police. Without another word, he pulled out his phone and called the police to have professionals authenticate the images, while Xuanwu tried desperately to intervene. He tried to flee, but was quickly detained by student council members. Soon after, the police arrived with technicians to perform an on-site demonstration of the evidence. The captain confirmed that the photos provided by Xuanwu were undoubtedly fakes, and then asked Ruanmin how he wanted to handle the situation since mediation seemed unlikely. Ruanmin insisted that the law take its course, as his reputation had been publicly damaged, causing Xuanwu to open his eyes in sheer terror at such cold determination. Realizing that begging Ruanmin was useless, Xuanwu turned to Zhentao Yin, grabbing his arm and weeping bitterly while pleading for a way out of this mess. He desperately reminded Zhentao Yin of his promises of love, begging him not to stand by while he was harassed, fearing his future at a top university would be ruined. He urged Zhentao to use his family's vast resources to save him, but the reality was clear. There is a price for everything, including detention and heavy fines. With a look of visible discomfort, Zhentao Yin pulled his hand away in disgust, watching in silence as the police led Xuanwu away for further investigation. Even as he was being forced into the police car, Xuanwu shouted one last harsh threat, just before the professor took the microphone to resume the competition. With extreme gravity, the professor announced that because Xuanwu had maliciously forged evidence and defamed a peer, his conduct was a total violation of the competition's principles. Consequently, his right to participate was formally revoked, a fitting end, considering he still harbored delusions of winning the first-place prize. It was almost a joke to think anyone still supported him, yet the final round of the competition proceeded toward its natural conclusion regardless of the drama. The event ended in total success with Ruanmin securing the first-place trophy, marking a significant milestone before the next stage of his academic journey began. We see that despite the previous chaos, the atmosphere began to shift as the focus returned to the actual merit of the student's work. There were those who tried to argue or insist on different outcomes, but once the truth is laid bare on the table, there isn't much room left for debate. To be honest, the world has a way of balancing itself out, even when things seem as though they might spiral out of control for a moment. Ruanmin found himself on a new path where the school's professors couldn't stop praising his brilliance, a stark contrast to his previous reputation. Many of his classmates began approaching him, not to mock him this time, but to earnestly discuss complex study problems and seek his guidance. Even a senior student reached out, sending him a valuable bank of practice questions to help him prepare for the next level of the competition. A few days later, as he was leaving the school building after a normal day of classes, something, or rather someone, blocked his path. He was stopped by Zhentao Yin, who appeared before him in a clean white dress, her face etched with an unmistakable sense of exhaustion and deep regret. Looking at him with a deeply complex expression, she whispered, "Ruanmin, I'm so sorry." She explained that she'd had some misunderstandings before, but insisted she no longer had any relationship with Fuanwo. Ruanmin simply replied that whether she had a relationship with him or not was strictly her business and Fuanwo's. He made it clear it had nothing to do with him, and to be honest, he wasn't the least bit curious. He reminded her that she had been on the other side before, fueling Fuanwo's arrogance, and he remembered it all quite clearly. He told her not to worry, but noted that he would be keeping everything that happened in mind. After saying his piece, he turned to leave, but Zhentao Yan's voice suddenly rang out behind him. She cried out, "Ruanmin, I like you. Can I try to win your heart in the future?" Before he could even offer a response, a sharp, piercing voice echoed from a distance, and then things took a turn. Fuanwo charged toward them at the speed of a 100-meter dash, his eyes bloodshot as he glared at Zhentao Yan. He began begging her not to break up with him, but Zhentao Yan now felt nothing but pure disgust for the pathetic man. Not wanting to get tangled in their drama, Ruanmin took advantage of their confrontation and turned to walk away. But he hadn't walked very far when we see Fuanwo heading back toward the residence at a normal pace. What Ruanmin didn't expect was that, just as he reached the door, he would be spotted. Right there at the entrance of the residence, a basin of dirty water suddenly came crashing down from above. It splashed him mercilessly, leaving his clothes completely soaked and dirty water streaming down through his hair. As it dripped onto the ground, a bitter chill instantly spread across his entire body. In that moment, we see Fuanwo leaning out of the dormitory window, watching his handiwork. With a malicious grin, he raised his voice so every passing student could hear his fake apology. He called out, "Ruanmin, I'm so sorry. It was an accident, of course." He shouted that he'd slipped and dropped the bucket, but added that since Ruanmin had such good grades now, a little dirt wouldn't hurt his studies. He went on, claiming that unlike Ruanmin, his own brain had grown dull and he simply couldn't learn anything anymore. He lamented that he was no longer popular and that now, apparently, everything he did was seen as wrong. His tone was dripping with sarcasm as he deliberately played the victim, trying to make it look like Ruanmin was using his academic success to bully him. Several students passing by heard his dramatic performance and stopped, their curiosity piqued by the scene. They lingered there, waiting to see exactly how Ruanmin was going to handle such a blatant provocation. Ruanmin let out a cold, quiet laugh and calmly wiped the dirty water from his face. He looked up at Xuanwu and repeated the man's claim, questioning if he had truly just slipped. He challenged him to come down and face him, noting that Xuanwu seemed to have forgotten the security camera pointing right at his window. The image of him pushing that bucket, Ruanmin pointed out, would have been captured with perfect clarity. Xuanwu snapped back, telling him to stop accusing the innocent and claiming that the security cameras were already broken anyway. He even suggested that perhaps Ruanmin had stood there on purpose, hoping to get hit just to cause trouble. Ruanmin simply replied that whether the cameras were working or not wasn't for Xuanwu to decide. He proposed a simple solution. They would have the security guard check the footage in front of everyone to see if it really was an accident. At that, Xuanwu began to panic. When he had pushed that bucket, he hadn't given the cameras a single thought. Now that he had been exposed in front of the crowd, he found himself completely at a loss for words. He could only grip the window frame tightly, his eyes filling with fear and desperation as the situation shifted. And then, right on cue, the security guard approached quickly with a tablet in hand and a very serious expression on his face. He stood directly in front of Ruanmin and looked up at Xuanwu, who was still hovering on the floor above. In a loud, clear voice, he announced that they had just seen the footage, and it was obvious he had pushed the bucket on purpose. The cameras recorded everything in full, and since this is quite dangerous behavior, you need to come down immediately. Follow me to the security office for a formal investigation. As he spoke, the security guard held up the tablet for everyone to see. The screen clearly showed the image of Xuanwu intentionally pushing the bucket of water. Standing there by the window, Xuanwu felt utterly powerless. His face turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Seeing the contemptuous looks from his classmates, he knew he had lost once again. But deep down, the resentment burning in his eyes only grew more intense. He secretly swore to make him pay, while Ruanmin watched him being led away by the guard without feeling the slightest bit of pity. After that, Ruanmin simply turned around and headed back into the dormitory. While he changed into clean clothes, Xuanwu, having suffered so many setbacks, began to frantically investigate the system. Finally, he forced the system to reveal a new and hidden function. It warned that if the host's performance continued to decline, his energy levels would become insufficient. To fix this, it was necessary for him to find a new energy target. If he could get someone to drink a special energy-infused 8 treasure porridge, he could steal their academic talent and achievements. This would allow him to recover his former status, a sign that the system was still useful after all. He told himself there was still hope, and that the most important thing now was to find a suitable new target. And so, Xuanwu set his sights on the student who had ranked second in the competition. As it turned out, that student happened to be Ruanmin's own roommate. Xuanwu approached him, claiming there were things he'd been keeping in his heart for a long time and wasn't sure if he should share. He knew that Jianbei was a simple, straightforward boy, the perfect mark for his plan. He is quite introverted and has very few friends at school. Xuanwu used this as his point of entry, and at that moment, Jianbei didn't suspect a thing. Nodding to Xuanwu, he went on to say that, in reality, he didn't know the whole story. He claimed he had noticed him since the very first day of classes. After all, with grades that good, it was difficult not to notice him. He said he'd wanted to be his friend since then, but Ruanmin found him first and wanted to befriend him instead. And so, he claimed he had lost the chance to develop a real friendship with him. He acted desperate, claiming he was defending justice and hoping Jianbei wouldn't judge him by his grades like the others. Jianbei asked how he could possibly look down on him, insisting he wasn't that kind of person. He explained that although he participated in the competition, he never wanted to draw any attention to himself. It was actually his bunkmate who had signed him up for it. Xuanwu told him he could see he was an honest person, asking if it was still in time for them to be friends. Jianbei simply nodded and agreed with a warm smile. Xuanwu had succeeded in his approach, carefully suppressing the pride and excitement in his eyes. He continued to lure him in according to his plan, letting out a deep, heavy sigh. This, naturally, prompted Jianbei to ask him what was wrong. He pretended that, in reality, he didn't want to say anything at all. After all, everyone knew by now that he'd had a falling out with Ruanmin due to a simple misunderstanding. But he claimed he wanted to save the relationship, noting it was a coincidence that Jianbei was his roommate. He added that, really, he shouldn't be saying too much in front of him. Jianbei asked if he was looking for help with something, telling him to just say it, as long as it wasn't too much. Xuanwu replied that he was very intelligent, admitting that while he truly wanted to be his friend, it was also true that he needed a favor, and with that, he suddenly pulled out 2 cans of 8 treasure porridge. He had them right there in his pocket, prompting Jianbei to ask what his intentions were. Xuanwu feigned a shy expression, claiming this was Ruanmin's favorite kind of porridge. He explained that back when they were friends, he used to buy them for him to drink all the time. Their classmates, he noted, had seen this with their very own eyes. He claimed that when he saw the porridge that day, he thought of him and simply had to buy it. He begged him to give 1 can to Ruanmin, offering the second can as a gift for his help. He urged him to try it, while Jianbei remained silent, studying Xuanwu for a few moments longer. Xuanwu quickly added, asking if they weren't friends now, after all. He told him to just say he wanted to give it to him himself, and not to mention his name at all. He insisted that if Ruanmin heard he was the one who bought it, he would definitely refuse it. Our poor Jianbei knew absolutely nothing about this 8 treasure porridge. Being kind-hearted, and seeing Xuanwu pleading with those watery eyes, he finally agreed. Xuanwu's plan was halfway to success, and he nearly let his satisfaction show in his eyes. After that, he exchanged a few more trivialities with Jianbei before making an excuse to leave. He mentioned that he had just passed by the laundry room a moment ago. There, he claimed to have seen a shiny garment that looked exactly like the one Jianbei had lost. He noted it had just been washed and was still wet, so he hadn't touched it. He urged him to go see if it was the one he had lost, and a surprised Jianbei thanked him warmly. Without wasting a second, he got up and headed straight for the laundry room. A few minutes later, we see him return to the bedroom with his brow slightly furrowed in confusion. Obviously, he hadn't found the clothes that had been mentioned. To be honest, we knew he wouldn't. The other boy simply claimed he must have been mistaken, and Jianbei didn't say much more about it. He looked at the 8 treasure porridge on his desk and offered one of the cans to his companion. He stammered, asking if this was meant for. It was for him, but the other boy said nothing, not even reaching out to take the can as he studied Jianbei. Under that steady gaze, he confessed automatically, asking if the other can on the table had also been given by him. He confirmed it, noting that he hadn't even touched it yet. Yes, a very wise decision indeed. He mentioned hearing that the boy liked this porridge very much, so he wanted to give him one too. The boy replied it wasn't necessary, advising Jianbei to take a very close look at the production date. He explained that Xuanwu was the type to be greedy for even the smallest of gains. He always bought products that were nearly expired and then kept them for who knows how long before giving them away. In the past, he used to drink them because they were friends, but it always resulted in a terrible case of diarrhea. He had suffered quite a bit, and hearing this, Jianbei quickly checked the cans only to find they had expired days ago. He had no idea, of course, that these were actually the cans his friend had secretly swapped while he was at the laundry. He thanked Jianbei for being willing to tell the truth, appreciating the honesty between them. He warned him that he was far too naive, making it easy for people with hidden motives to use him. He left the hint there and said no more, while Jianbei wore an expression of sudden, clear understanding. The following night, Fuanwu dragged him into the small forest, his face twisted with pure rage. Deep down, he had already guessed the reason. Jianbei must have refused to keep dealing with him. He accused Ruanmin of being the one behind the scenes, playing tricks behind his back once again. He claimed Ruanmin was ruining his plans over and over, calling him truly and utterly wicked. Speaking of wickedness, Ruanmin noted that he wasn't even a 10,000th as evil as the man before him. He told Fuanwu to stop pretending, as he already knew everything about the system. They needed to speak plainly now, and Fuanwu demanded to know when he had discovered the system's secret. He spiraled, asking why he had become like this and insisting that everything was Ruanmin's fault. Ruanmin countered that from the moment he attacked him, he should have foreseen that this day would come. But Fuanwu refused to accept it, lamenting that he was so close to being admitted to a prestigious university. He couldn't understand why this error occurred just as he was about to take first place in the competition. He believed he could have been specially recruited by a world-renowned university. He was about to reach the pinnacle of his life, and he demanded to know why Ruanmin had suddenly shattered it all. He asked if it was all on purpose, a deliberate attempt to ensure things didn't go well for him. He accused Ruanmin of being jealous, trying to take away everything he had worked for. Ruanmin calmly replied that he didn't want to take anything. He simply didn't want to give him what didn't belong to him. He observed that the man was now losing his mind, and Fuanwu responded with a sudden, sinister smile. He admitted that he was indeed crazy, but at this point, it hardly seemed to matter anymore. Having been pushed to such an extreme, he felt he had already lost absolutely everything. He brought up the school river, noting how every year, a few people unfortunately drown after falling in by accident. He looked at Ruanmin and asked how long it would take for the current to carry his body away if he threw him in tonight. As soon as he finished speaking, several thugs with hair dyed in various colors suddenly appeared from behind him. They began to close in, while Fuan Wu's eyes looked as though they were practically spitting fire. Wan Min simply smiled and, quite calmly, held up his phone for them to see. The screen showed an active call, and on the other end was the emergency number, 110. Fortunately, the police arrived just in time, and Fuan Wu and his group were promptly gifted a pair of silver handcuffs. We later learned that during the interrogation, he wouldn't stop rambling about systems and other such nonsense. They sent him for a psychiatric evaluation, and he was immediately transferred to a mental health facility. Not long after, news arrived from the hospital stating that Fuan Wu was experiencing a moment of lucidity. He kept screaming that he wanted a visitor, so the next morning, Wan Min took a taxi to the psychiatric hospital. He wanted to see Fuan Wu's miserable state with his own eyes, and who could blame him, really? The visiting area of the hospital was a depressing place, to say the very least. The sharp, clinical smell of disinfectant stung his nose as he walked through the halls. He had barely sat down in the chair when Fuan Wu suddenly snapped his head up. He was wearing a blue and white patient's uniform that looked both faded and badly wrinkled. His hair was a complete mess, matted and sticking to his forehead in clumps. Upon seeing Wan Min enter, he became frantic, stumbling forward and throwing himself against the glass. He pressed his hands so hard against the cold surface that his skin turned a ghostly, bloodless white. He screamed Wan Min's name over and over, his voice raspy and filled with a desperate sense of pleading. He was trying to cling to one last shred of hope, but Wan Min only watched him in silence, without saying a single word. Seeing that there was no response, Fuan Wu grew so anxious that his eyes turned bloodshot and his forehead nearly pressed against the glass. The plea in his tone grew even deeper as he cried out, "Wan Min, I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. I was confused before. I was under some kind of spell. I shouldn't have stolen your notes. I shouldn't have hurt you. Please, can you forgive me?" Fuan Wu's voice was thick with sobs, a far cry from his arrogant school persona, looking very much like a child on the verge of a total collapse. "Do me one favor, go find Zhentao Yin for me, okay? Go and tell him that I know I was wrong, that I'll never ask for favors again. I won't covet those empty titles anymore. I just want him to get me out of here, since his family has money and power. He surely has a way, and he likes you so much. He used to listen to everything you said. Go and beg him. I'm sure he'll agree. I just don't want to be in this place anymore. This is no place for people. Everyone here has lost their minds, and I feel like I'm going crazy too. Wan Min, I'm begging you, for the sake of our old friendship." Wan Min thought back to that friendship, from the moment the system was used to bind him, to the theft of his notes using that 8 treasure porridge. He remembered the collusion to isolate him, watching his descent from genius to failure, and even the attempts to harm him in a past life. Wan Min's cold gaze acted like a sword, cruelly piercing through Fuan Wu's disguise and tearing it to shreds. Fuan Wu recoiled sharply, staring back as his once refined voice suddenly rose with a sharp edge of hysteria. "It's your fault. It's all your fault. That's why I've turned into this. It's all your fault, Wan Min. Everything. If only you hadn't been so ungrateful. If you hadn't accepted my 8 treasure porridge, how could my system have been deactivated? How else could I have fallen from being the genius that everyone loved?" He blamed Wan Min for becoming what he was now, claiming it was all because he had been surpassed and constantly challenged. He asked how he could have helped making Wan Min his target, and as Fuan Wu spoke, he became increasingly, violently agitated. He looked like a man possessed, convinced that everything happened because Wan Min had tried to act superior in front of him. He shouted that if Wan Min hadn't shown off on purpose, no one would have ever realized who he truly was. He accused him of destroying everything he had, ruining his future, and driving him to the brink of madness. To him, Wan Min was nothing but a curse, a bringer of bad luck who had tainted his life. Once again, he threw himself against the glass, slamming his forehead with a dull thud, yet he seemed to feel no pain at all. We see him screaming in a blind rage, his eyes bloodshot and filled with fury. He felt he should have had everything, the prestige of Minghua University, but now, it was all out of reach. A brilliant future, and even Zhentao Yin himself. In his mind, all of these things rightfully belonged to him. He screamed that Wan Min had snatched it all away, his voice dripping with pure, unadulterated hatred. He repeated his hatred for Wan Min, wondering how else he could have ended up in such a miserable state if not for him. He vowed that even in death, he wouldn't let him escape, obsessing over everything that had been lost. Wan Min countered that this wasn't his fault, but rather the result of Fuan Wu's own greed and hypocrisy. It was his own lack of scruples that had destroyed him, a self-inflicted ruin that had nothing to do with anyone else. And yet, even now, we see that he remains completely without remorse. Wan Min told him he had nothing left to say, and warned him not to ask anyone to deliver messages on his behalf. He revealed that Zhentao Yin would not be coming to save him, as he had long ago realized the truth of his character. Those words were the final straw, shattering the last remnants of Fuan Wu's fragile sanity. He began to hammer on the glass frantically, screaming and cursing in total despair until the nurses arrived to restrain him. They held him down with force as he resisted, kicking and throwing punches in a desperate, final struggle. His eyes remained fixed on Ruan Min like poisoned daggers, while he repeatedly muttered the same dark promise. He whispered that he would kill Ruan Min, his voice a low, chilling rasp. The nurses dragged him away with great difficulty, his screams slowly fading until the visiting area was once again reclaimed by silence. We see the frantic prints of his hands still marking the glass. Then, Ruan Min simply turned around and walked away. As he stepped out of the asylum, the sun shone down upon him, a welcome change from the darkness inside. It was warm and dazzling. At a distant bus stop, a homeless man sat quietly under the shade of a tree. The moment he saw Ruan Min, he smiled immediately, offering a look of pure, innocent joy. In his hand, he still held the bread that had been given to him the last time they met. Compared to before, his condition had improved significantly, which was a small mercy, all things considered. At the very least, he was no longer drooling. After that day, Ruan Min moved away from the city for good. He began a new life where no one would bother him, and he never saw Zhuan Wu ever again.